All right. Hey, welcome to the Beach Brothers Show. We all live in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and we love Virginia, the state of Virginia, and Virginia businesses and politics. We're actually very concerned about Virginia businesses since the closure and since some of the challenges that have happened in our nation as of recent. So, we're going to take a quick moment just to give some positive energy to our nation and to our nation's businesses. All right, so this guy here, 757 Insurance Man, Jose Cruz, is our business guy. So if you'd like to have your business shouted out on the Beach Boys show, the Beach Brothers show, talk to him. And this guy on the far end is
Yo,
crazy enough about his city that he's running for city council.
oh yeah.
Que loco. Que loco. All right. So, hey, I'm Seko Varner, and welcome to the Beach Brothers show. So, Conrad, who do we have joining us? No, no, no. Let me slow down. Jose, who's our sponsor today? Oh, that rhymed.
Well, Seko, today we're gonna go ahead and shout out Avail Smoke Shops, Avail Vapes Smoke Shops. It's over on Virginia Beach Boulevard off of Independence, over in the town center area. They got a wonderful people that vape. They got a wonderful variety of different flavors and juices. Man, you'll go in there and you'll have a blast. Just go stop in, see Cheyenne, and tell Jose and the Beach Boys sent you.
Okay, so I've never vaped before. So, what's the experience like?
I haven't either.
It's an enjoyable, relaxing experience for people that just vape and have no nicotine addiction. Some people just do it just for the flavor of the juices or just to relax. Others use it to get off of smoking because they have juices in different levels of nicotine, so that you can start at the level that you're at smoking and then wean your way off of it. It's
All
interesting.
right. Thank you for the vape classroom. Hey, brother Conrad, who do
Not
we
a
have
problem.
joining us today?
Well, the Beach Brothers welcome all candidates and business types to talk about Virginia happenings. And tonight we have Zainab Mohsini, a candidate for Virginia's 11th congressional district. And the 11th is a tight district in Northern Virginia featuring significant portions of Fairfax, Quantico, Prince William County, and Herndon. It's currently served by six-term incumbent Democrat Jerry Connolly as Zainab's primary opponent. She's got an incredible life story. As a college student, she studied at Virginia Tech for communications. To earn a living, she had various customer service related jobs. In 2015, she became the first member of her family to graduate college. And like many grads, debt was crushing and jobs were hard to come by. She still volunteered for immigrant organizations, served in AmeriCorps. She has led training on racial justice, women's rights, LGBTQ issues, and I like that she teaches citizenship classes. And on that note, I'll begin with my first question. And my favorite political show is The West Wing. President Bartlett invited freshman Congressman Peter Lean of Texas into the Oval Office. Bartlett said to him, "You think when your folks got you out in '74, they imagined they were taking you to a place that'd be willing to make you a congressman." And the congressman smiled and said, "As a matter of fact, sir, I think that's exactly what they imagined. You teach citizenship. You're a refugee from Afghanistan, and here you are on the cusp of a very similar symbolism. What does that mean to you?"
I have never seen The West Wing, but I agree 100%. I think that the American dream that we are told and sold across the globe is exactly that, right? That a refugee from Afghanistan comes to this multicultural, multiracial, diverse country and has the opportunity to run for Congress. And my mom worked really hard. The application process and getting through the resettlement program is incredibly hard. It takes about 2 to 3 years. The United Nations and the Homeland Security is involved, and they do thorough investigation of families who apply. The application process in itself requires multiple interviews, interviews of neighbors, relatives. They revalidate and check your stories and things like that. So she's worked incredibly hard to be here. And as an American, I think that this is America. This is the beauty of this country.
Okay, interesting. All right, great. Well, I really like looking at your website. The design of it is really attractive, has some great information, and I did get a chance to read a little bit about your story as well. So, I realize that a lot of people, become candidates because there are things that they want to change.
Right.
The things that they want to change in the world, things they want to change in their state, their city. But I often wonder what things that people think are doing well. In Virginia, what do you think is going right in Virginia? What do you think is going right in Virginia?
I think that Virginia is blue now. So as a Democrat, I think that that's a huge accomplishment, and that's the result of the multicultural working class is making our perspectives heard. It is growing diverse in the suburbs, and that's what's making Virginia blue. And I think that with that comes a lot of progressive ideologies, right? So I think that one example of that is the passing of the ERA, the cap on insulin, passing of the Equal Rights Act for the LGBTQIA plus community. So I think that that's something that I feel like Virginia is doing great. I think that there are so many perspectives that are having the opportunity to be a part of the political process that aren't usually. There are working class people representing us in the state and local level. There are people who don't have political experience who are coming into this because they want to change this country, our community, the society for the better.
You led with Virginia's blue. That's what's going right.
I think that, yes, I believe in social justice, and I think that right now that is happening, and it is happening because the legislature is blue. And I think that something as significant as a cap on insulin benefits everybody, and it's happened because Virginia is blue.
Intriguing. Jose, what do you think, brother? Jose, what do you think? Unmute yourself, brother.
Technology.
I agree with what you said. It's very, very intriguing what she brings to the table for this election. So I mean, we wish for the best.
Thank you.
I hope you can bring as much positive change as we can hope to get, because we really need it.
All right. Well, then, Jose, do you have a question for our guest?
Oh, as a matter of fact, I do. Now, 2020 is your year, because what better time than now to be an influencer for change? And just one election cycle ago, 4 other young, progressive minority women shook up the Democrat establishment and were elected to Congress. Omar, Tlaib, Cortez, Leslie. You're taking on a 6-term incumbent yourself. Do you take hope from what they accomplished and what you can add with them for future accomplishments?
Absolutely. I think it's so incredibly important for the multiracial working class, which is the majority of the US, to have a voice in Congress, and a strong, bold voice. And I want to help pave the way for people like me, people like the working class coalition that is putting their hat in the ring for Congress. As you look around, these various perspectives from all over the country are running for Congress. And I think that I want to pave the way for people like me to feel like we have a voice in this process, in our political process, and maybe at the local level, at the state level, or at the national level. So I do take hope from them, and I want to be in Congress and advocate for progressive policies like they are doing, policies like Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, tuition-free public colleges and universities, and campaign finance reform. So I think that we need to get money out of politics to have our politicians work for the people and not for the interest of the wealthy and the powerful and the privileged. I want to end the military-industrial complex. I want to reform our policing system. So I think that when we have a strong coalition of working class people, people who have lived experiences of what it feels like to be on the ground and a working class person, and I want to join that coalition of the squad, as the media calls them. And absolutely, I take hope from them and hope to accomplish these goals with them.
Okay.
All right. Well, COVID has left a considerable economic and personal damage in its wake in Virginia. And we know Virginia is a state that only recently expanded its Medicaid rolls, and it's the Democrat General Assembly to do that. And you're running for federal office.
Yes.
For you to expand on why a Medicare for all model would have been superior to what we have had and what we will have now.
I think that it's a beautiful thing that Virginia expanded Medicaid. It has helped like thousands of people get health insurance that were either that were uninsured before. However, there is still existing system, existing contracts with the private insurance companies that limit people's ability to have healthcare because of the network requirement. So this marginalizes communities that are already marginalized, right? So it places rural areas where there is a limit of providers, low-income communities where there's a limit of providers, and so people have insurance, but then it's still restrictive because it has a in-network requirement. And I think that undocumented people are an exclusion from this expansion of Medicare for all. And they're, depending on your immigration status, some immigrants don't qualify for the Medicaid. So I think that when we talk about there's a process that people have to go through to apply for the expansion of the Medicaid that Virginia rolled out. And I think that some people just don't have that necessary access, or either limitations as to how to fill out the form, or language barriers, or access to broadband and things like that makes it difficult, or access to the systems to navigate to be able to apply for the expansion of the Medicaid. So it excludes a lot of people too. And under Medicare for All, it will allow everyone to get coverage regardless of their immigration status, regardless of their income level. And the version of Medicare for All that I want to advocate for, that I support, it treats healthcare as a human right. So it takes the profit factor out of it. Your life shouldn't depend on whether a company can make profit off of it or not. It institutes a racial justice training program that requires medical professionals to learn about implicit biases and about how to create anti-racist medical environments for people. And I don't need to tell everyone that there are studies that do indicate that there's racial biases in our healthcare system against communities of color, so I want the racial and anti-racist trainings to be a part of the Medicare for All that I'm advocating for. I want it to cover transition services for LGBTQ plus people, for transgender people, and PrEP. So it benefits the entire LGBTQIA plus community, and I want it to fully cover abortion because I think abortion is a medical service that needs to be covered under Medicare for All.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. One of your higher issues is educational equity. This struck good bells for me because I'm interested in a fantastic education for our Americans, particularly those who are Virginians. So I'm a teacher, and I'm a former VB school board candidate. And I've heard that you said that new federal laws are needed to strengthen our educational system. What are your thoughts on that? What new laws? What needs to be strengthened? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that a lot of, and I think I say this on my platform, and I say this in every opportunity that I get, that a lot of my policy platforms points are informed by the fact that I was a canvasser. I went door to door, and I've met with so many people, and some of my personal experiences. So I think educational equity is something that's so incredibly important to me, because I think a strong education strengthens a country, strengthens a society. And that's why I support a universal pre-K program to be a part of our public education system. I think that this directly helps low-income families who pay so much for childcare and aren't able to start at a level playing field. I think that higher income families are able to start their kids at pre-K, and lower income families aren't. So I think that we as a society need to create a level playing field so everybody could start at the same spot going into our educational system. And it will help single mothers, parents who stay at home, single mothers who want to go back to the workforce. So I think that there's a lot of communities that are left behind because we don't have such a program. We need free tuition-free public colleges, which the incumbent doesn't support. I think that when we require people to get a college education to come out of the cycles of poverty, we owe it to those people who want to take that step to facilitate it. Since having a college education is just like such a huge requirement in social mobility, in economic mobility, I think that we should 100% facilitate that. We need to forgive existing student loan debt. There are so many young people across this country, millions of us, who cannot make any life decision because our student loan debt is just crushing us. People aren't able to participate in the economy. People aren't able to start families. People aren't able to buy houses because they're burdened by student loan debt. And we need to increase the federal funding. Sorry, go ahead. I have more.
Wow. Yeah.
I have
You're running. You're running the race.
Yes, I am.
What did you start? See what you started.
Wow. Okay. We'll circle back. Go ahead and finish your race. You have 25 more miles to go.
Okay, all right, sounds great. I haven't trained for an actual 25-mile race, but I'll try. I think we also need to increase our federal funding for the public education system. Right now, it's based on your property values, and I think that creates a barrier for people who live in lower income neighborhoods and that tend to be communities of color, that tend to be rural communities who have lower property values. Therefore, their funding is lower. So I think that we need, if we're working towards an equitable society, we have to increase our funding for public education.
All right. Great answer. Brother Jose, I hope you can catch up with her. I know she's about 15 miles ahead. Unmute yourself, good brother, and yeah. Let's see what wow. You've been on the road. You've been on the trail hard, and it really shows. That's good. That's good.
I think you have to believe in something to want to do this work. I think that our representation should be of people who want to make positive change in our society. And I think that that's a whole motivation of my campaign, is to have people who actually care about improving lives.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, my next question for you. You were fighting for racial justice before this year, and I'd like to point out the diversity that we have on the show right now. A Black man, a Latino man, a white man, an Afghani woman. We're all existing as Virginia neighbors, and we all want great community improvement among the differences. You point out correctly that racism impacts social, political, economic, and emotional lives of people of color. Then we have the events of the past several months. Touch on your views as to how you can help fix it by becoming a congresswoman.
I agree with you. As you said, I believe that the racism is such a huge part of our policies when it comes to economics, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to our political, social lives. So I want to reform the police system. I think that we need courageous leaders to stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, to call for fundamental change to our policing system in the US. And I think that the continuous murder of Black people by cops week after week after week is proof that we need a reform in our policing system. We need to change in hiring, training, evaluation of the police force, strong regulation that must be implemented to train police officers on implicit bias, fire racist officers. We need to prioritize community policing and de-escalation techniques, so we have our communities feel protected and safe. Moreover, we need to unbiased third parties to be involved in investigating police officer-related deaths and shootings. And I think that on a wider level, we need to demilitarize the police, because officers should not be using weapons of war to police, especially in communities of color who tend to be over-policed. And the incumbent had the chance. There was a bill that to demilitarize the police, and he did not take that chance. And I think that that's why we need bold leaders, and more police officers should come from the communities that they serve, demographically represent those neighborhoods which they operate in. And I think that police need to be accountable to community boards who are also demographically representative of the neighborhoods that they serve and oversee, and provide police officers with feedback and create local policies that hold police accountable. And I want to end the prison industrial complex. I think ending cash bail, focusing on rehab programs, while decriminalizing most drug offenses, and retroactively reducing and ending drug-related sentences, creating incentives for lawyers to be public defenders. There's such a shortage of public defenders to represent people, creating strict anti-discrimination regulations at the federal level. When it comes to plea deals and sentencing, I think shifting from a punitive-focused society to a restorative justice society. I think that there's so much intersection between the way policing happens. I think that one thing that the small step that we took towards decriminalizing marijuana, so marijuana justice, is something that I support and I want to pass when I get to Congress. Immediately decriminalize marijuana and commute the sentences of people who have been charged with these nonviolent crimes, and implement like implicit bias trainings to end law enforcement from over-policing communities of color, which everybody knows they are, when it comes to drug offenses. Unfortunately, communities of color are at the forefront of the discrimination.
Comprehensive answer. I really like that.
I think that there's just so much intersection between our laws that exist, like I think housing discrimination, Medicare for all these laws that need to, policies that need to be introduced, that need to be passed, that are gonna, with a racial justice focus, that are gonna benefit so many communities that are marginalized, and communities who are lower income, who tend to be people of color, who tend to be rural communities. So when I get to Congress, I have a plan.
Many plans.
Many plans, yes.
Well, I'd like to jump in next. I personally am running for Virginia Beach City Council, and flooding mitigation in the city of Virginia Beach and improving public transit for Hampton Roads with a rapid bus transit system are my biggest goals. And I want to use my voice to rally support for state of Virginia funds and the United States government funds to supplement these goals. As you're an aspiring Congresswoman, would you like to explore the use of federal funding in the state of Virginia for very similar issues?
Absolutely. So I support the Green New Deal resolution and the Green New Deal bills, which my opponent isn't. There's a Green New Deal bill that is in the House right now that was introduced in November and only has like a handful of Democrats for co-signers. And I think that when we say we support the Green New Deal resolution, people think that you support, but we also have to have bills to be able to do the actual work. So as part of the Green New Deal, I think that we need to invest in our infrastructure to uplift marginalized communities and protect us against climate change that is so inevitable. I support clean transportation, so electric buses instead of diesel buses, which tend to be the mode of transportation in lower income communities. I want to expand public transit, particularly in lower served areas, such as communities of colors, low income communities, and rural areas. As for flood mitigation, I think that building barriers to help protect us from flooding, investing and expanding our wetlands, and building a public housing and affordable housing to further that is further away from the shoreline to protect us against climate change. So absolutely 100%, I think there should be federal support in your vision.
Wow. That's one of the pushbacks that I've heard with the Green New Deal, or the new Green Deal, is the economic cost.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
I think that there's pushback in a lot of things that people propose that change lives, right? So I think that the U.S. government has continuously just found trillions of dollars to spend on wars. Nobody ever asks, where are we going to get the money to go to this war that we're in? We spent $2 trillion in Afghanistan where nobody knew what we were doing. Like nobody, as proven by the Afghanistan papers, right? So I think that there needs to be political will and there needs to be a bold push for these policies to change. And I think that when there's political will, we find the money. And these are necessities that we need to pass in order to survive as the humankind. I think that I don't buy we don't have money for it anymore.
Intriguing. One of the things that you mentioned was restorative justice.
Mm-hmm.
We spoke with Alyssa Baldwin. I think she's running for Congress. I'm not sure if she's running in the area that you're pursuing, but she also mentioned restorative justice.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, hearing politicians or seated politicians or candidates use the term restorative justice seems new to me. What does restorative justice mean to you, and how can we implement that, particularly from a congressional level?
I think that their restorative justice. So the reason why I use the term restorative justice is because I come from this social justice and organizing and community. So my political awareness and my political education happened because I got involved in these social justice circles. So I think that when we talk about restorative justice, what I envision is like working with communities that have been marginalized in our policies, that have been left out, who haven't had voices that represent them. So, for example, for the Black community, I think that we need to investigate reparations. I think that we cannot move forward in terms of social creating an equitable society unless we talk about race and how the damage racism has contributed to our Black communities. So I think investigating reparations, working with organizations that are on the ground, like the Black Lives Matter movement, like the NAACP, to craft policy platform points to uplift these communities. I think that when we talk about the prison industrial complex, I think that so many communities of color are impacted by policies that were racist. And I think that investing on those communities and making those voices heard, so we are creating an equitable policy system to uplift these communities and restore them to have a shot at equality, at the American dream, like the rest of us.
Interesting. And it looks like we have a couple of our guests who are saying that they completely agree. JC, if you can tap back in and tell us what you completely agree with. She might just completely agree with the entirety of everything that you said. I find that it's interesting that political candidates and even seated politicians have uttered the words reparations when the push for reparations and restitutions of the descendants of those who were enslaved in America started in the early 1800s. That now we are 2020, and it seems to roll off everybody's tongue so easily. It's very intriguing to me. So I'm thinking that there are some changes that are happening in our country that were totally unforeseen 10 years ago. So how do you think America's changed in 10 years? You know, this is 2020. Since 2010, how's America changed, and where direction should it go in?
I think that when we talk about reparations being part of the conversation in the 1800s, I think that racism has continued to be a huge part of the policies and the social lives of so many of us. I think that so that's something that may have been a part of the conversation, but it hasn't been politically explored. But I think that there's power in conversation. I think that there's power for us to have conversation about this, to see how we can best invest in those communities that have been impacted by racism, maybe it Black communities or Indigenous communities or other communities of color that are being left behind. So I think that a lot of like my political awareness has happened in the last 3-4 years. So I think that in terms of political change, there is a huge uprising of voices being heard, right? So I think a lot of working class people, a lot of Americans who weren't politically active are coming to the forefront and realizing how much policy making, how much politics impacts our daily lives. So I think that's the change that I see. That's the hope that I see in our future, that there are these young people, there are these people who haven't been part of the political process or didn't feel like they have a voice or they have representation, are becoming involved. And I think that something like reparations needs to be explored for us to move forward. It is no longer a political talking point. I think it is something that needs to be a part of mainstream conversation. It was part of the presidential debate, and it should be on every politician's policy agenda, and people need to hold them accountable to what they say, that we need to explore reparations. And I think that that's the only way forward, we have to come to terms with the fact that America has racism in its fibers, and we need to have this very difficult conversation to move forward.
Interesting. I personally think that the conversation about reparations has been explored. It's been explored, and I think we've come to some conclusions. I think the conclusions were distasteful, but I'll step back. Brother Conrad. Woo. Take us in a different direction, brother. Where are we going?
I just want to touch on that. Yes, it was only slightly brought up in the presidential debates to this point, with committing to the want to study the issue, as opposed to Marianne Williamson, who wanted to fully commit to the idea of doing it. And she was one of the first ones to drop out. I also want to sort of mix the combination of environmentalism and racism as they sort of meet with each other, because in Virginia, there's been talk about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and how that a lot of it goes through very underserved and very impoverished areas of the state. And that just negatively affects minority communities in a whole other fashion, other than just touched on earlier. This is also environmentalism. Perhaps you can provide a little bit of commentary on that.
I think that part of the reason why these big it's not, I understand that it's a very complex issue, and it's not like done, it's solved by simple words. So I think that a couple of things that I envision in solving in being a part of the environmental justice approach of things is that we need to take money out of politics. So many of the Virginia politicians are in the pockets of these companies who are big oil companies, big fracking companies, part of the pipeline. So I think that taking money out of politics and holding those politicians accountable to the people and accountable to their job to represent the people in the interest of the people is one step to go towards that. And I think that when we talk about the environment, we need to look at it as an environmental justice perspective. So I think that a lot of the communities that are impacted by the pipeline are rural communities, lower income communities, and communities of color. So I think that when we have representation, when we have voices at the table and are being cognizant of these various communities, I think that's how you get policies changed. That's why so many corporations profit and are able to just buy out our politicians, because they have the money and they have the influence. And I think that when there's power in your vote, there's power in your voice. So I think that when we come together as the working class people, who is the majority of the U.S., as a coalition, then we have an influence on our politician to make these policies focused on racial justice, focused on environmental justice.
All right, Mr. Jose, the win zone.
Well, my views on it is, I mean, yeah, we need to talk about it, but the problem isn't us talking about it. It's all has been is talking. They're talking about what they're gonna do, but nobody ever, it's like I said, it stays at just a talk, and there's nothing done. And as much as it's talked about, it's ignored, and that's why I think we need to get as much positive changing as possible. So I stand behind what you say wholeheartedly.
I think that the change in status quo, right? I think that politicians for years, for decades, have paid lip service and just kept people just paid lip service and hasn't really shown anything. And I think that that's the positive movement that's happening. It's just a lot of people are realizing that they're not going to take this anymore. There's a lot of challenge to the status quo. I think that I stand firm on the fact that there's power in conversation. I think that something like the Green New Deal, something like Medicare for All, wasn't a part of the conversation at all before the last election cycle. And now it's part of every politician's policy platform point. So I think that when we push for bold policy ideas and we hold people accountable to that, change does come about. And I think that, yes, there has been a lot of lip service from politicians, but I think that that's the change that's coming up, that we need to, that people are not going to not take status quo as is.
Interesting. First of all, I'd love for you to comment on the picture, which is the header of your Twitter page. And then secondarily, Teresa left a great comment, and it's interesting that she would agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. She asked, just what do you think is unjust in Virginia, which is kind of the flip of the question I asked earlier. So what's bad in VA? What's horrible in Virginia? But first, tell us about this picture. It's cute.
Okay, so I don't know whose picture it is. I found it off Google. So I was born in a very small village in Afghanistan, and my earliest memories, because I left Afghanistan was when I was younger, about 5 or 6. My earliest memories of Afghanistan is me being a shepherd. And I hear stories from my sister, who was a little bit older than me, that when I would bring my herd into their sleeping room at night, I would lecture them. And so basically my job as a 5-6-year-old was to keep them away, feed them on the hills and stuff like that, but bring him back home, but make sure that no fox or coyotes ate them. So I would bring him back and I would say, you need to listen to me, and you need to I'm telling you these things because of your safety and stuff like that. And I found that picture and I was like, oh my gosh, is it me? And it's not me. but like, and I just made it. So that's the story behind that picture.
All right, so you're the good shepherd, huh? Intriguing.
You said
That's
that.
intriguing.
Yeah.
That could be a great campaign. Hey, follow the good shepherd. I just want to keep you safe, Virginia. I just want to keep safe. What is unjust in Virginia?
I think
what needs to be changed?
Right. Okay. So I think that I'm going to talk specifically within District 11, and then I'll expand on what's unjust in Virginia. So District 11 is a fairly wealthy district, and I think despite the fact that I love Teresa's comment about we're not sheep. I appreciate that you're not sheep. So despite the fact that it's a fairly wealthy Virginia, there's huge income gaps or wealth gaps between white communities and communities of color. So there are the Black maternal mortality rate is parallel to the rest of the country, despite the fact that like I said, District 11 is a fairly wealthy area. There is like the disparity in education. There's disparity based on race. There's disparity based on race in our policing system. So it's parallel to the rest of the country. It's not as out in the news, but it exists, and there's studies. There are reports on this. So it's not. So these disparities exist. There's a class divide between people of color and white communities. So I think that there are unjust situations that maybe not be obvious to Teresa, but someone like me, as a person of color, as a woman of color, as an immigrant, like I face these on a daily basis. An anecdotal example is I went to Virginia Tech and I graduated with $50,000 in student loan debt. I couldn't find a job for months, whereas my upper income peers were able to use their mom, their dad, their network to be able to find a job, didn't accrue any debt. So these are the the inequities that exist, which I think is unjust. And some of it is racial, some of it is just class. So I think that to say that Virginia is this equitable paradise, or this like the opposite of what Teresa just asked me, that what is just in Virginia, right? So I think that just because some issue doesn't impact somebody like Teresa doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So there are inequities, and there are people who are facing these inequities. The highest number of communities of color in Virginia were the highest impacted by COVID-19. That is unjust. Some communities in Richmond, 90% of the people who died from COVID-19 were Black. That is unjust. So I think that, so those are some of the examples that is part of the motivation of why I'm running for office, because I want to have a voice at the table to point out these things that other people don't think is unjust.
Interesting. Wow, we can round out now, but we had another intriguing question that's populated.
Yeah, please do.
Take on the question?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. I don't.
All right, cool.
Yeah, please take the question.
Okay. All right. Teresa mentioned that all her family are lower middle class, and they've had their first graduate from college in this generation. She mentioned that she is white, which she assumed that you made that assumption.
Yeah.
And she asked, should we all make the same wage?
So a couple of things. First of all, I didn't assume that Teresa's white. I am pointing these inequities that exist, that some are racially based, some are class based. And these exist between white communities and communities of color. So I'm not making any assumption based on Teresa. I am stating facts, right? I think that it's great. People should be able to go to college and become the first person or the last person to graduate from college in your family. I think it's wonderful, amazing. And I think that I forgot what was the second part of the question.
Well, wage. What do you think about wage? Should we have? You mentioned Medicaid for all. I guess her question kind of lies on that. Do you think that everyone should have the same wage?
Absolutely not.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
That's not what I'm promoting. I think everybody should have the right to a livable minimum wage. So I'm not advocating for everybody to get the same wage, because experiences are different, education is different, the requirements of the job are different. So I don't advocate for everybody to get paid the same wage, but I do think that people should be able to live. So I advocate for a livable minimum wage. I also advocate for a cap at high wage. I think that it's unjust, to use Teresa's term, that Jeff Bezos is going to be a trillionaire, and then Amazon workers are making $14 an hour but aren't allowed to go to the bathroom.
Whoa, that's interesting. Speaking of money, this is a hard segue. This is just a hard segue. Mr. 757 Insurance Man, hop in as soon as you can. This is a hard segue. We wanted to shout out some businesses as we get ready to leave tonight's broadcast, and also Miss Zainab, if you could also shout out at the end a business that you love in your area. So Jose.
Oh, thank you. Well, the next big shout out to save water damage of Virginia Beach. A lot of homeowners out there, when their house gets all this some is done, they don't know who to call. 1-800 Water Damage of Virginia Beach is an awesome business. They're located right there in the heart of town center. Okay, they specialize in water damage, flood damage, mold damage, sewage cleanup. They do commercial and residential, and they have emergency services. They're all available 24/7. So stop in at 424 Investors Place in Virginia Beach, and stop in and see Antoine Omaka and tell him Jose and the Beach Brothers sent you. Or if not, you could even give them a call at 757-942-2702, or just call them at 1-800 Water Damage. Tell them Jose and the Beach Brothers sent you.
Good stuff. Good. Zainab, do you want to shout out a business in your area before we leave?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big foodie. I love food. So I'm going to shout out my favorite restaurant, which is this small Pakistani restaurant on the border of Sterling, Virginia and Herndon, Virginia. It's called Shalimar Charcoal Kebab, and their butter chicken is to die for. So I want to shout them out.
All right. I've had Pakistani food a couple of times. Yeah. Good stuff.
I like all types of food. We're going to have to stop it and check it out, brother.
Hey, I'm not a foodie. I'm definitely a fatty, so I'm trying to stay away from as much food.
I keep an equal balance.
Soy muy gordo. So you've been watching the Beach Brothers show. Tonight we had a special guest who's running for Congress. Very intriguing tweets. So check out her Twitter page. Any last words, Zainab?
To y'all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate all the awesome questions. My website is ZainabMohsini.com. You can volunteer, donate, check out our policy platform points. Let us know what you think. My Twitter is at ZainabMohsini.com or at Zainab Mohsini on Twitter. I'm sorry. And our primary is June 23rd. Public safety is really important to us. So anybody listening from District 11, please request your mail-in ballot by June 16th. Your health is the most important. So please be safe while you practice your right to vote.
All right, good. Well, thanks for stopping in. Wow, we have a shout out from Teresa. She says, Harpoon Larry's. I've been there a couple of times as well. Yeah, good stuff. All right, Jose, any last words?
I don't know. That Harpoon Larry's just stood on my mind. We might have to go check that out too.
Oh, I've been there quite a few times. Very nice. Very tasty.
All right, so it's set. We're gonna have to go check it out.
All right, well, I'm Seko Varner. That's Jose Cruz, and that's our comrade, Conrad, who's running for Virginia Beach City Council. You've been watching the Beach Brothers Show. If you're a seated politician or a candidate, get in contact with our comrade, Conrad, and he'll get you on the show. If you're a business and you want to have your business shouted out in the Jose way, get in contact with Jose Cruz. Get in contact with Jose Cruz. He'll get you on the show, get you mentioned, get some business flowing. We're opening up Virginia, so we want to make sure that they open up their wallets and visit your business. All right, and I'm Seko Varner, your serial entrepreneur, your producer, your educator, and we want to say keep it beachy. See us on the next round. We have somebody beautiful coming up on Thursday, and June 11th. Is it June or July 11th? We have a big one coming up.
Hey, we need to check out. We also need to go and check out Teresa's crab dip. She says is the best thing that they got at Harpoon Larry. So we're gonna have to check that out when we get there.
You know what?
They got the best crab
I
dip.
don't eat crabs. Okay, good.
I
good.
do.
I don't eat crabs. I don't eat. I kind of eat like a Hebrew. So, hey, Conrad, we have some good people coming up. So if you're a seated candidate or if you're a seated politician or a candidate, get in contact with Conrad. We'd love to have you on your show, our show. This is the Beach Brothers Show. Hey, you guys have a great day. Keep it beachy and be safe.